The truth always finds a way to surface, doesn't it, Richard? My voice filled our dining room, steady and clear despite the thundering of my heart. Around the table, 5 pairs of eyes fixed on me with expressions ranging from confusion to dawning horror. I placed the manila folder on the polished mahogany table, the one that had belonged to Richard's grandmother. 20 years of Sunday family dinners had left their mark on its surface: wine rings, minor scratches, memories etched into wood. Tonight, I would add one more indelible mark. Elaine, what are you doing? My mother Margaret's voice cracked slightly. She knew. They all knew. What I should have done months ago. I opened the folder slowly, methodically arranging 6 photographs in a neat row. Look familiar, Melissa? My sister's face drained of color as she stared at the images her and Richard checking into the Fairmont Hotel, his hand possessively on the small of her back. Richard kissing her neck in the elevator. Room service for 2 on our anniversary weekend. Richard lunged forward. This is absurd, is it? I slid another document across the table. Bank statements showing $500,000 transferred from our grandson Jacob's college fund into Melissa's boutique. Your signatures, Richard. Both forged and legitimate. Mom, you can't seriously believe, Melissa began, tears already forming. She knew. I cut in, my voice terrifyingly calm. They all knew. For months. I turned to my mother. Didn't you, Mom? Richard stood, knocking his chair backward. Elaine, we can discuss this privately. No. I remained seated, power flowing through my stillness. We're done with secrets. Done with lies. I reached for the final envelope. And as of today, I'm done with all of you. My lawyer's business card fluttered onto the table. Mr. Moore, you've been served. The beginning. 3 months earlier, I knew something was off the moment Richard walked through our front door. It wasn't just that he was late. It wasn't just that he'd forgotten my 54th birthday entirely. It was the scent, a delicate perfume that clung to his collar, something floral with notes of jasmine and sandalwood. Not the kind of fragrance you accidentally pick up from brushing past someone in an elevator. Sorry I'm late, he said, loosening his tie and dropping his briefcase by the door. The Anderson account went sideways. Had to stay for damage control. I nodded, continuing to clear away the remains of the birthday dinner I'd prepared for us. Candles burned down to stubs. Wine, opened but barely touched. A slice of chocolate ganache cake, my favorite, sitting forlornly on a dessert plate. Is that new cologne? I asked casually, taking his suit jacket to hang up. What? No, he blinked twice his tell. 27 years of marriage had taught me his every tick. Probably just the Uber driver's air freshener. I nodded again, like I believed him. Like that explanation made perfect sense. Like I hadn't spent the last 2 hours spiraling because my sister Melissa had posted a beach photo on Instagram with the caption, "Solo retreat." Finding myself in the waves. But in the reflection of her designer sunglasses, barely visible, was a man's silhouette. A man wearing Richard's favorite Rolex, the one I'd given him for our 25th anniversary. There's still cake if you want some, I offered, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. I'm good. He moved to the kitchen, poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon. Not hungry. Of course not. They probably had dinner together before he came home. You've been quiet lately, he remarked, studying me over the rim of his glass. Have I? I rinsed dishes that were already clean. I like it. He smiled. You used to overthink everything. 27 years, and I'd never noticed how patronizing his smile could be. Flashback early years. I met Richard when I was 26, fresh out of paralegal school and working my first real job at Bryant and Associates. He came in as a client, young, ambitious, with a startup financial consultancy that needed legal structuring. He had confidence that bordered on arrogance, but back then, it felt like strength. He knew what he wanted and how to get it. And what he wanted, surprisingly to me, was the quiet paralegal who organized his documents with methodical precision. You see details others miss, he told me on our third date, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. That's rare. When he proposed 6 months later, my mother Margaret was ecstatic. Financial advisors always become wealthy, she whispered as she helped me try on wedding dresses. And he's so handsome, Elaine. You're lucky. Maybe I was. We built a good life. Richard's business grew. I scaled back my career when our son Mark was born, picking up part-time paralegal work that I could manage around school schedules and soccer practices. We bought the Tudor house in Westbrook that I'd always dreamed of. Holidays were picture perfect, family vacations well documented. If Richard sometimes flirted too much at parties, I told myself it was just his way. If he occasionally came home smelling of unfamiliar perfume, I convinced myself it was innocent. If my sister Melissa looked at him a beat too long when she thought I wasn't watching, I buried the observation deep. Families are complicated, my mother would say whenever I hinted at uncomfortable dynamics. But they're all we have, Elaine. Don't rock the boat. So I didn't. For 27 years, I steadied the boat while others drilled holes in its hull. At the family lunch, "You've lost weight," Melissa remarked as we settled into our booth at Salvatore's, her eyes scanning my outfit with that mixture of compliment and criticism she'd perfected since childhood. "The divorce diet works wonders, doesn't it?" I bristled at her presumption. "There's no divorce, Melissa. Richard and I are just having issues." She nodded sympathetically, though I caught the flicker of something else, disappointment in her eyes. "Of course. I'm sure you'll work it out. You always do." 2 days after noticing Richard's perfumed collar, I'd suggested this lunch with my sister under the guise of repairing our somewhat strained relationship. In reality, I wanted to observe her up close, test reactions, look for tells. "How's Emma doing with college applications?" I asked, changing the subject to her 17-year-old daughter. "Stressed. But she's brilliant, you know. Just like Mark was." She stirred her iced tea. "Speaking of which, have you heard from him lately? How's little Jacob?" "They're both wonderful. Jacob's obsessed with dinosaurs now." I smiled genuinely for the first time that day, thinking of my 4-year-old grandson. "Mark's talking about moving back east eventually. Says Seattle is too far from family." "That would be lovely." Melissa's smile tightened slightly. She'd always been jealous of my relationship with my son, perhaps because her own relationship with Emma was more complicated. The waiter brought our salads, and I watched as Melissa adjusted her new Courtney bracelet, a piece I knew cost at least $4,000. For someone struggling to keep her boutique afloat, she certainly wasn't lacking for luxury accessories. "I love that bracelet," I commented. "Is it new?" "This?" "Yes. Just a little something I treated myself to. Business has been good lately." "I'm surprised. I thought retail was struggling, especially high-end boutiques." She shrugged elegantly. "I found an investor who believes in my vision." I nodded, taking a bite of salad to hide my expression. "By the way, I saw your beach photos from Santa Barbara. Look peaceful." It was exactly what I needed. She reached for her water. "Sometimes you just need to escape." "You went alone?" A barely perceptible pause. "Of course. Funny, I kept my tone conversational. I thought I saw someone reflected in your sunglasses in that sunset photo." Her fork stopped midway to her mouth. "What?" "Maybe it was just a stranger walking by." I smiled pleasantly. The reflection showed what looked like a watch. "Similar to Richard's Rolex, actually." She laughed, but it was pitched too high. "God, Elaine, you've always had such an imagination. First, you thought Dad was having an affair with his secretary when we were kids. Then you were convinced my college boyfriend was stealing from your wallet. Now this?" She reached across the table to pat my hand. "It's why we worry about you, you know. You see things that aren't there." The condescension burned like acid. This wasn't the first time my family had made me doubt my own perceptions, made me feel like I was the problem. But this time, the gaslighting only strengthened my resolve. "You're right," I conceded with a smile. "Silly me." In the paralegal office, Mrs. Moore? Thomas Jenkins stood in the doorway of the small office I used at Frankel and Associates, where I'd returned to full-time work after Mark left for college. At 62, the former detective cut an imposing figure, tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that revealed nothing. "Mr. Jenkins, Please come in. I closed the door behind him and gestured to the chair across from my desk. Thank you for meeting me here. Your friend Diana explained the situation. Said you needed discreet investigation services. His voice was graveled, worn by years of difficult conversations. Yes. I took a deep breath. I believe my husband is having an affair with my sister, and I need proof. That's complicated. His expression didn't change, but his eyes, sharp and assessing, took on a note of sympathy. It gets worse. I reached into my drawer and pulled out a folder. I'm a paralegal. I know how to look for inconsistencies. Richard's been moving money, significant amounts, from our joint accounts. Over $500,000 in the past 6 months. Thomas raised an eyebrow. To where? That's what I haven't been able to track completely. But I suspect it's going into my sister's boutique business. Or somewhere else they can both access it. Why now? After 27 years, I finished for him. Because this isn't just about me anymore. The money he's taking includes funds we'd set aside for our grandson's education. Jacob is 4, and he's the light of my life. I won't let Richard steal his future. Thomas nodded slowly, understanding the stakes. Do you have documentation of the withdrawals? I handed him the folder. Bank statements, unusual transfers, dates that correspond to times he claimed to be on business trips, but his location data showed otherwise. It's not complete, but it's a start. He flipped through the pages, his expression growing more serious. Mrs. Moore, this isn't just infidelity. Based on what I'm seeing, this could be financial fraud. Wire fraud if he's moving money across state lines. I know. My voice was steady. I'm prepared for whatever we find. Investigation like this, it gets expensive. I have my own money. Savings my husband doesn't know about. My father, my real father, not the man who raised me, left me a trust that matured when I turned 50. I smiled thinly. Ironic, isn't it? The man my mother cheated with provided me the means to catch my own cheating husband. Thomas's eyes widened slightly at this revelation, but he recovered quickly. I'll need a retainer. And complete discretion from you. No confrontations, no accusations until we have everything solid. Agreed. I pulled out a check already made out. When can you start? I already have. He tapped the folder. The moment I walked in here and saw how organized your documentation is, I knew this wasn't a jealous spouse case. This is methodical. He stood up. You're good at your job, Mrs. Moore. So are you, Mr. Jenkins. I look forward to your results. Flashback, family dynamics. My mother raised us to believe that family was everything. Blood is thicker than water, she'd say, usually right after making me share my new dress with Melissa or give up my dessert because your sister needs it more. Margaret Wilson came from old money that had mostly disappeared by the time she reached adulthood. She married Nathan, my stepfather, when I was 5, after her affair with my biological father ended badly. Nathan was kind but weak, always deferring to my mother's stronger personality. Melissa arrived 2 years after their marriage, the golden child, the do-over, the daughter who looked like my mother rather than taking after a man whose name was never mentioned in our house. Why does Melissa get everything she wants? I asked once when I was 12, after she'd been given permission to attend a party I had been forbidden from at the same age. Because Melissa needs more support, my mother answered. She's sensitive. You've always been the strong one, Elaine. Self-sufficient. It's a compliment. It didn't feel like a compliment. It felt like abandonment dressed up as praise. Melissa learned early how to manipulate this dynamic, tears on command, dramatic proclamations of insecurity, always positioning herself as fragile and in need. And it worked. Our parents rushed to protect her from consequences, to shield her from disappointment, to ensure she never faced rejection. I learned different lessons: self-reliance, invisibility, the art of swallowing hurt until it calcified into something harder. By the time I married Richard, I was an expert at ignoring warning signs, at making excuses for people who couldn't be bothered to consider my feelings. You're lucky Richard chose you, my mother told me the night before my wedding. With your serious nature, I worried you'd end up alone. Maybe alone would have been better than this. Evidence mounting. The email from Thomas arrived at 7:14 p.m. on a Tuesday, while Richard was at his weekly client dinner that I now strongly suspected involved my sister. Subject line: documentation package. I locked my home office door before opening it, hands trembling slightly as I clicked through the attachments. Hotel surveillance photos, financial records, GPS location data, text message transcripts obtained through methods I didn't want to know about. There they were, Richard and Melissa, checking into the Four Seasons on our anniversary weekend, the weekend he told me he had a financial conference in Chicago. Richard kissing her neck in the elevator, his hand on her waist, possessive and familiar. I zoomed in on one photo, studying my sister's face. She was laughing, head thrown back, looking younger and more carefree than I'd seen her in years. Richard was looking at her with undisguised hunger. Had he ever looked at me that way? I couldn't remember. But the pictures weren't what made my stomach drop. It was the financial documentation that followed. Thomas had traced the missing money, all $500,000 of it, to a series of accounts. First to an LLC Richard had created without my knowledge, then to offshore accounts in the Caymans, and finally back to a business investment account for Hayes Luxury Boutique, my sister's failing store. Money that was meant for Jacob's future. I printed everything, organized it meticulously in a folder, and then sat in the dark, waiting for the shock to pass and the clarity to come. When it did, I knew exactly what I needed to do. The plan forms. You want to do what? Diane nearly choked on her coffee. We were sitting in her kitchen, the morning sun casting stripes of light across the marble countertop. My best friend since college, Diane had survived her own divorce battle a decade earlier when her husband left her for his 25-year-old assistant. I want to pretend reconciliation. Make them think I've given up, that I'm willing to accept whatever lies they tell me. I stirred my tea calmly. I need time to get everything in order. Financial documentation, legal paperwork, evidence secured where Richard can't destroy it. And then I burn it all down. The coldness in my voice surprised even me. Diane studied my face. This isn't just about the affair, is it? No. I set my spoon down carefully. It's about 27 years of gaslighting. It's about my mother always choosing Melissa over me. It's about them stealing from my grandson's future. It's about all of them, every single one, knowing what was happening and watching me suffer. Your mom knows? She all but admitted it when I hinted at my suspicions. Told me I was seeing things again, that I should let it go for the sake of family peace. Thomas found emails between her and Richard discussing how to keep me manageable. The betrayal still felt like a physical wound. She's been helping them hide it. Jesus, Elaine. Diane reached across the counter to squeeze my hand. What about Barbara? Does your half-sister know too? Almost certainly. She and Melissa have always been thick as thieves. Plus, Thomas found text messages from her to Richard warning him that I was asking questions. Diane shook her head. So what exactly is your plan? First, I meet with my lawyer Maria Delgado, the one who handled your divorce. I secure my assets, document the fraud, prepare divorce papers. Then I pretend reconciliation for a few weeks while Thomas gathers the final pieces we need. And the grand finale? I host a family dinner. All of them together. And I lay out everything: the affair, the financial fraud, the conspiracy of silence. With evidence so undeniable they can't possibly gaslight their way out of it. Diane whistled low. Scorched earth. They're the ones who set the fire, I said quietly. I'm just making sure they burn in it too. Flashback: mother and daughter. I was 7 years old the first time I realized my mother didn't see me clearly. It was my birthday party. She'd invited the entire first grade class, planned games and decorations, ordered a princess cake with my name spelled correctly in pink frosting. It should have been perfect. But halfway through the party, Melissa, not quite 2 years old, began crying because she couldn't pop the balloons like the older children. My mother immediately stopped the game, gathered everyone around, and had us all watch while Melissa was allowed to pop 3 balloons by herself. Isn't she clever? My mother cooed, while my friends shuffled awkwardly and I stood frozen, the birthday crown slipping down over one eye. When I complained later, My mother's face hardened. Don't be selfish, Elaine. Melissa is just a baby. You're old enough to share the spotlight. I never forgot the lesson. My feelings mattered less. My needs were secondary. My pain was an inconvenience. 47 years later, nothing had changed. Mom, can we talk? I stood in my mother's immaculate living room the day after receiving Thomas's email. I'd driven straight there, needing to give her one last chance to be honest with me. Of course, darling. She patted the sofa beside her. At 76, Margaret Wilson was still elegant, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her clothes expensive and tasteful. Is everything all right? You look tired. I'm not sleeping well. I sat down, maintaining some distance between us. I'm worried about Richard and Melissa. Her expression flickered a concern, then weariness. What about them? I think they're spending time together. Without me knowing. She sighed heavily. Elaine, we've talked about this. Your suspicious nature has always been your worst quality. It's not suspicion if it's true. What evidence do you possibly have? Her tone was dismissive, the way it always was when I challenged the family narrative. I could have shown her the photos then. The bank statements. The hotel receipts. But I held back, giving her one last opportunity to choose me. A mother knows, Mom. The same way you've always known things about us. She looked away, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her silk blouse. Even if there was something of which I'm not saying there is, what good would come from pursuing it? At our ages, isn't peace more important than pride? There it was. Not a confession, but confirmation. She knew, and she expected me to swallow this betrayal too, for the sake of her comfort. You're right, I said quietly, standing up. Some things are better left alone. Relief washed over her face. I'm glad you see reason, darling. Family is everything, after all. Yes, I agreed, gathering my purse. It certainly is. As I walked to my car, I made a final decision. There would be no mercy, no last-minute reprieves. They had chosen their sides long ago. It was time they learned I had chosen mine. The false reconciliation. I've been thinking, I told Richard over dinner 3 nights later, my voice carefully modulated to sound tentative. Maybe we should try counseling. He looked up from his steak, surprise evident. For weeks, I'd been distant, asking questions he couldn't comfortably answer. This sudden olive branch was unexpected. Counseling? What brought this on? I pushed my food around my plate. I don't know. I don't want to lose what we've built together. 27 years is a long time. It is, he agreed cautiously. And family is important. Mom keeps reminding me of that. I offered a small smile. Maybe I've been overthinking things. Seeing problems that aren't really there. Relief softened his features. This was what he wanted to hear, that I was backing down, returning to my role as the compliant wife who looked the other way. I think that's wise, he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. We're good together, Elaine. We always have been. I nodded, forcing myself to curl my fingers around his. I'm sorry if I've been difficult lately. It's forgotten. He squeezed my hand, then released it to continue eating. Actually, I've been meaning to talk to you about something. The Prestons are selling their lake house. I was thinking we might buy it as a family retreat. For us, for Mark and Jacob when they visit. My heart pounded. The Prestons' lake house was worth at least $1.2 million. Can we afford that right now? With Jacob's college fund and all our other commitments? Don't worry about the money. His smile was confident, bordering on smug. I've made some excellent investments. We're more than covered. Investments. Like my sister's failing boutique. Like whatever else he was hiding from me. If you're sure, I said, the picture of wifely trust. I'd love a place where Jacob could spend summers. Later that night, I sent a text to Thomas. Need detailed financials on all our assets. Husband suggesting major real estate purchase. Suspect more hidden accounts. His reply came within minutes. Already on it. Meeting tomorrow, 2 p.m., usual place. The game was in motion. at Melissa's boutique. Elaine. What a surprise. My sister's expression was a mixture of delight and wariness as I entered her boutique the following week. The store was empty except for a bored-looking sales associate arranging scarves on a display. I was in the neighborhood. I smiled, running my fingers along a rack of dresses priced at over $800 each. Thought I'd stop by and see the new stock you mentioned at dinner. Of course, let me show you around. Melissa took my arm, guiding me through the small, elegantly appointed space. Everything gleamed in new fixtures, expensive lighting, marble countertops that hadn't been there during my last visit 6 months ago. Business must be booming, I commented. These renovations are gorgeous. A flush of pride colored her cheeks. The investor I mentioned has been incredibly supportive. He sees the potential here. He must have deep pockets. Um. She avoided my eyes, moving to adjust a display of handbags. What brings you to this part of town, anyway? Meeting with my financial advisor, actually. I've been thinking about setting up a separate account for Jacob's college fund. Something Richard can't touch. Her hands stilled momentarily. Oh, why would you need to do that? I shrugged. Just being cautious. Richard's been talking about big investments lately, and I want to make sure Jacob's future is secured. Richard knows what he's doing, she said quickly. He's brilliant with money. Still. I picked up a silk scarf, examined the price tag, $350. A grandmother worries. And I'd hate for anything to happen to those funds. Nothing will happen to them, she insisted, taking the scarf from my hands and returning it to its display with slightly more force than necessary. Richard would never risk Jacob's future. The irony was so thick I could taste it. You're probably right, but it doesn't hurt to be careful. After leaving the boutique, I walked around the corner and slid into the passenger seat of Thomas's nondescript sedan. She's nervous, I reported, and defensive about Richard's financial decisions. She should be. Thomas handed me a folder. We found more. Looks like your husband has been systematically draining accounts for over a year. Not just Jacob's college fund, but your retirement accounts too. And get this, he's listed as a silent partner in your sister's business. Owns 60%. I flipped through the documents, each page confirming what I already knew. He's planning to leave me. This is his exit strategy. Seems that way. But he didn't count on you noticing. I closed the folder. How much longer until we have everything we need? 2 weeks max. My guy at the bank is digging into some offshore transfers that look suspicious. And we're still tracking down who authorized some of these signatures. They don't all match your husband's handwriting. Try my mother's, I suggested. She's been unusually interested in our finances lately. Thomas raised an eyebrow. You think your mother is involved in the fraud? I think my mother would do anything to protect Melissa. I stared out the window at my sister's boutique, including helping steal from her own great-grandson. The family dinner, the stage was set. My dining room gleamed under soft lighting, the table laid with our best china, flowers arranged in the crystal vase that had been a wedding gift from my father-in-law. Music played softly in the background, Richard's favorite jazz album, a detail he would later recognize as deliberate. I'd invited them all: Richard, Melissa, my mother Margaret, my stepfather Nathan, and my half-sister Barbara. Family dinner to celebrate new beginnings, I told them. A chance to put recent tensions behind us. They arrived in pairs, my mother and Nathan first, bearing an expensive bottle of wine. Barbara next, checking her phone constantly as if expecting important news. And finally, Richard and Melissa, arriving separately but within minutes of each other, a transparent attempt at discretion. Everything looks lovely, my mother commented, helping me arrange appetizers in the kitchen. You seem so much more relaxed lately. I am, I confirmed, maintaining the pretense I'd carefully constructed over the past weeks. I've realized what's important. Family, she said with satisfaction. Exactly. I smiled, placing a hand on her arm. I'm so grateful for all of you. Dinner progressed smoothly through the first 2 courses. I played the perfect hostess, keeping wine glasses filled, conversation flowing. If anyone noticed I was drinking water instead of wine, they didn't mention it. I needed complete clarity for what was coming. As dessert was served individual chocolate souffles, Richard's favorite, I gently clinked my water glass with my spoon. I'd like to propose a toast, I said, rising slightly from my chair. All eyes turned to me expectantly. To family, I began, raising my glass. To loyalty, to honesty, to trust. To family, they echoed, glasses lifting. Richard smiled at me across the table, clearly believing his plan was working. That I was subdued, compliant, back in my proper place. And to new beginnings, I continued. Speaking of which, Richard, didn't you want to share our exciting news about the lake house? He straightened, pleased to take center stage. Yes, actually. We're in final negotiations to purchase the Preston property. 3 acres, private dock, guest house, plenty of room for everyone to enjoy. It sounds wonderful, my mother enthused. What a perfect family gathering place. That's what I thought, Richard agreed, warming to his topic. And with Jacob getting older, he needs somewhere to spend summers, make memories. Jacob's future is so important to us, I added. Isn't it, Richard? Of course. He nodded seriously. Nothing matters more than providing for the next generation. I took a sip of water, set my glass down carefully. That's why I was so concerned when I discovered money missing from his college fund. The room went silent. Richard's smile froze. Missing? My mother asked, too quickly. What do you mean? $500,000, I said calmly. Transferred systematically over the past 14 months to an LLC, then offshore, then back to a business investment account for Hayes Luxury Boutique. I turned to Melissa. That's quite an investor you found. Melissa's face drained of color. Elaine, I don't know what you're talking about. Stop. I held up a hand. The lying stops now. I reached beside me for the manila folder I'd placed on the side table, opened it, and began laying out documents one by one. Bank statements showing transfers from our joint accounts. Hotel receipts from your romantic weekends, including our anniversary when Richard claimed to be at a conference. Surveillance photos. Text messages. I placed each piece of evidence on the table like cards in a solitaire game. And this, my personal favorite emails between my mother and Richard discussing how to keep me from asking too many questions. This is ridiculous, Richard sputtered, but the confidence was gone from his voice. Is it? I turned to my mother. How long have you known about their affair? Margaret's hands trembled around her wine glass. I don't know what you. How long? I repeated it, my voice steel. She glanced at Melissa, then back at me. A year. Maybe more. The confirmation, even though I'd expected it, still felt like a physical blow. And the money? Did you know they were stealing from Jacob's future? It wasn't stealing, Richard interjected. It was an investment. Melissa's boutique will be worth millions in a few years. Jacob would benefit eventually. I laughed, the sound hollow. Right. That's why you hid the transfers, forged my signature, and routed the money through offshore accounts. Because it was all legitimate. Elaine, please, my mother began. We can work this out as a family. There's no need for dramatics. Dramatics? I turned to her slowly. Is that what you call it when someone discovers their entire family has been conspiring against them? When a grandmother learns her grandson's education fund has been embezzled. When a wife finds out her husband and sister have been sleeping together for years. My stepfather Nathan, who had remained silent throughout, finally spoke. Margaret, did you really know about all this? She had the grace to look ashamed. I was trying to protect everyone. No, I corrected. You were protecting Melissa. Like you always have. At my expense, and now at Jacob's. Barbara cleared her throat. Maybe we should all calm down and discuss this rationally. Nothing to discuss. Barbara echoed, her voice rising. Elaine, this affects all of us. No, I said coldly. What happens next affects only those who betrayed me. I pulled out another document and slid it across to Richard. Divorce papers. My lawyer filed them this morning. Richard's face darkened as he scanned the pages. Financial misconduct? Criminal conspiracy? Are you insane? Everything's documented, I replied. Every transfer, Every forged signature, every email planning how to hide it from me. I turned to Melissa, including your role as co-conspirator. You can't prove anything, she whispered, but her trembling hands betrayed her fear. Actually, I can. I nodded toward the living room, where Thomas stepped into view, having entered through the back door as planned. Mr. Jenkins has provided the court with comprehensive evidence of wire fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement. The district attorney is quite interested. You brought a stranger into this? My mother's voice rose with indignation. Family matters should stay private. He's not a stranger. He's a former detective who specializes in financial crimes. I smiled thinly. And this stopped being just a family matter when you all conspired to steal from my grandson. Richard stood abruptly. This is absurd. I'm not listening to any more of this. Sit down, I commanded, and something in my voice, a new authority he'd never heard before, made him comply. I'm not finished. I turned to my mother, whose face had gone ashen. There's one more thing you should know. Thomas found something interesting while investigating the family finances. I withdrew one final envelope. Remember the trust fund Grandmother Bell left me? The one you told me was depleted by her medical expenses before she died? My mother's eyes widened. Elaine, that was 20 years ago. The trust wasn't depleted. You diverted it with the help of the family lawyer into accounts for Melissa and Barbara. I opened the envelope, revealing bank statements decades old. $500,000 that should have come to me when I turned 35. Money that could have put Mark through college without student loans. Money that would have given me independence. I did what I thought was best, she whispered. You had Richard. The girls needed security. And now I have this. I placed one last document on the table. The trustee has been notified of the fraud. The funds, plus 30 years of interest, are being reclaimed. That's another conversation you'll be having with legal authorities. Nathan stared at my mother in shock. Margaret, tell me you didn't. She couldn't meet his eyes. This is insanity, Richard tried again, his voice less certain. You're tearing apart your entire family over some misunderstandings and financial decisions that, let me be perfectly clear, I interrupted. This isn't about revenge. This is about justice and consequences. I stood, gathering the documents back into the folder. You all made choices. Calculated, deliberate choices to lie to me, steal from me, and gaslight me when I question anything. Now you get to experience the consequences. What do you want? Melissa asked, tears streaming down her face. Money? An apology? Tell me what will make this go away. Nothing will make it go away. But here's what happens next. I assumed the calm, authoritative tone I used in the law office when explaining complicated procedures to clients. Richard, you'll be served with a restraining order tomorrow. The divorce proceedings include freezing of all joint assets pending investigation. The law will determine whether criminal charges are filed. I turned to my sister. Melissa, your boutique's assets are being seized as proceeds of fraud. I've also filed a civil suit against you personally for the full amount stolen plus damages. You can't do this, she sobbed. I'll lose everything. So would Jacob if I hadn't caught you. I faced my mother next. Mother, the trust fund fraud has been reported to the appropriate authorities. Whether they pursue criminal charges against an elderly woman remains to be seen. But make no mistake, that money is coming back to me with interest. Barbara started to speak, but I held up a hand. And Barbara, while you weren't directly involved in the financial fraud, Thomas found numerous text messages showing you knew about the affair and the missing money. The partners at your law firm might be interested in your willingness to conceal financial crimes. The room fell silent except for Melissa's quiet sobbing. Elaine, my stepfather finally said, I had no idea about any of this. You have to believe me. I studied his face, the man who had raised me, who had always been kind but passive. I believe you, Nathan. But your silence was still complicity. What about Mark? My mother asked suddenly. Have you told him what you're doing to his family? A low blow, but expected. Mark knows everything. I called him last week. My voice softened slightly. He and Jacob are flying in tomorrow to help me pack. Pack? Richard looked up sharply. What do you mean, Pack? I'm leaving. Tonight? Actually. I've rented a place near Mark's new job in Connecticut. He's moving back east, as I mentioned earlier. I allowed myself a small smile. We're going to start fresh. As a real family. You're moving across the country? Just like that? Richard's shock seemed genuine, as if he couldn't fathom me making such a major decision without his approval. Just like that. Thomas stepped forward. Mrs. Moore, the car is ready whenever you are. I nodded, gathering my purse. I've already packed what matters to me. The lawyers will handle the rest. Richard surged to his feet again. You can't just walk out. After 27 years? After everything I've given you? Given me? I laughed incredulously. You've taken, Richard. My trust. My security. My sister. My self-worth. You've taken and convinced me I was lucky to have the leftovers of your attention. I moved toward the door, then paused, turning back to survey the ruins of my family one last time. They stared back at me with expressions ranging from shock to fury to naked fear. For what it's worth, I said quietly, I did love you all once. Very much. Then I walked out, closing the door firmly behind me. Aftermath. 3 months later, Grandma, watch. Jacob's voice rang out across the beach as he splashed in the shallow waves, his dinosaur swim trunks bright against the blue Connecticut shoreline. I see you, buddy. I called back, smiling as Mark steadied his son through the gentle surf. From my beach chair under a wide umbrella, I could observe them both without getting sand in my new laptop, where I was finishing my law school application essay. At 54, I was about to become the oldest first-year student in Harvard Law's incoming class. The idea both terrified and exhilarated me. My phone buzzed with a text from Diane. Court date set. Richard's plea deal includes full restitution, but only 6 months jail time. Thoughts? I considered this news. 6 months seemed insufficient for what he'd done, but the full restitution, over $1.2 million, including Jacob's stolen funds and my diverted trust, was the important part. Fine with me, I typed back. Jacob's future is secure. That's what matters. Another text arrived, this one from Thomas. Melissa settled. Full amount plus interest. Bankruptcy filed last week. I felt a momentary pang, quickly suppressed. My sister's boutique had been shuttered, her reputation in tatters. The fashionable life she'd built on stolen money had collapsed like a house of cards. She'd tried reaching out several times, tearful voicemails, pleading emails, even a handwritten letter I'd returned unopened. Perhaps someday I would be ready to hear her explanation. But not yet. The wound was still too raw. My mother had suffered the least severe consequences. Her age and health had discouraged prosecutors from pursuing criminal charges for the decades-old trust fund fraud. But the money had been reclaimed, with interest, reducing her and Nathan to a much more modest lifestyle than they'd grown accustomed to. Barbara had been fired from her law firm when the partners learned of her peripheral involvement in concealing financial fraud. Last I heard, she had moved to Florida to start over. As for me, I was starting over too, but on my terms. Mark jogged up from the water, Jacob on his shoulders. Mom, we're starving. Ready for lunch? Absolutely. I closed my laptop and stood, gathering our beach bags. What's the verdict? Pizza or sandwiches? Pizza. Jacob shouted, bouncing on his father's shoulders. Mark grinned up at his son. The dinosaur has spoken. As we walked toward the boardwalk, Mark fell into step beside me. How's the application coming? Almost done. Just polishing the personal statement. Still weird to think of my mom as a law student, he teased. Never too late to become who you were meant to be, I replied. It had become something of a mantra these past months. Mark's expression turned serious. I got another email from Dad yesterday. He wants to see Jacob before he reports to prison next month. I considered this carefully. Despite everything, Richard was still Jacob's grandfather. What do you think? I think that's up to you, Mom. After what he did. No. I shook my head firmly. It's your decision as Jacob's father. I won't let my feelings dictate your choices. I touched his arm. But whatever you decide, I'll support you. He nodded, relief evident in his face. Thanks, Mom. We reached the pizza place, a cheerful beachfront joint with red checkered tablecloths and license plates on the walls. Jacob raced ahead to claim his table by the window. Later, as Mark took Jacob to play the ancient arcade games in the corner, I sipped my iced tea and watched them through the window, silhouettes against the summer sky. My new life wasn't perfect. There were still difficult days, moments when grief for what I'd lost or what I'd never really had it threatened to overwhelm me. But for the first time in decades, I was truly breathing, making choices based on my own desires rather than others' expectations. Learning to trust my perceptions without second guessing myself. Building a life centered on what mattered most to my son, my grandson, my education, my future. My phone buzzed again with a text from Diane. Thinking of you today. Proud of you, warrior woman. I smiled and typed back. Some truths hurt, but they also heal. Then I put the phone away and went to join my family. Epilogue 1 year later. The lecture hall buzzed with activity as I gathered my materials, sliding my property law textbook into my bag. At 55, I stood out among the first-year law students, but had found unexpected camaraderie among the handful of other non-traditional students, a former nurse, a retired military officer, a widowed teacher. Ms. Moore? Professor Winters called from the front of the room. Do you have a moment? I made my way down the tiered steps. Of course. Your analysis of the Schmidt case was exceptional. She handed me back my paper, a bright red plus marking the top corner. Have you considered applying for the summer clerkship with Judge Martinez? He specifically asked me to recommend students with practical experience in family law and financial crimes. Pride bloomed in my chest. I'll definitely look into it. Thank you. Outside, autumn painted the campus in russet and gold. I checked my watch just enough time to grab coffee before meeting with my study group. My phone chimed with a reminder. Jacob's dinosaur exhibit, Saturday, 2 p.m. As I crossed the quad, I spotted a familiar figure sitting on a bench near the law library. My step faltered momentarily before I continued forward. Melissa. My sister looked up, nervous fingers adjusting her scarf. She'd aged this past year, lines etched deeper around her eyes. Her clothing simpler than the designer labels she'd once favored. Elaine. She stood, uncertain. I hope it's okay that I came. Your department's secretary told me your schedule. What do you want? I kept my voice neutral, neither hostile nor welcoming. To talk. If you're willing. She gestured to the bench. Just for a few minutes. Against my better judgment, I sat, maintaining distance between us. I have a study group in 20 minutes. She nodded, twisting her hands in her lap. I've been in therapy. Really working on myself, not just going through the motions. Good for you. I've been trying to understand why I did what I did. Not to excuse it, but to make sure I never hurt anyone that way again. She drew a shaky breath. I was always so jealous of you, Elaine. Your confidence. Your intelligence. The way you never seemed to need validation the way I did. Seemed being the operative word, I said quietly. I know that now. She looked down at her hands. Mom always told me I needed special care, that I was fragile. It became my identity, the delicate one who deserved more because she couldn't cope with less. It was intoxicating, having that power. I remained silent, letting her continue. When Richard started paying attention to me, it felt like finally winning something you had. Something valuable. Her voice cracked. I told myself you didn't appreciate him anyway. That you were too cold, too independent. I created a whole narrative to justify betraying you. The familiar anger stirred, but beneath it was something else, a sad recognition of patterns that had defined our family for generations. And the money? I asked. Shame colored her cheeks. I knew about some of it. Not all. Richard told me it was his money, that you wouldn't miss it. I chose to believe him because it was convenient. Convenient, I repeated flatly. That money was for Jacob's future. I know. Tears spilled down her cheeks. There's no excuse. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Elaine. I don't deserve it. I just. She pulled an envelope from her purse. I wanted to give you this. I took it cautiously. Inside was a check for $75,000. It's not everything, she said quickly, but it's all I have right now. I sold my condo, my car, everything of value. I'm working as a sales clerk at a department store. I'll pay back every penny, even if it takes the rest of my life. I studied the check, then my sister's face. The glossy polish was gone, revealing a woman I barely recognized, humbled, remorseful, struggling. How's Emma? I asked, surprising myself with the question. Confused. Angry. She's in college now, on scholarship since I can't help much. She asks about you sometimes. A pang of regret shot through me. My niece was another casualty in this family war, innocent of her mother's sins. Tell her she can call me if she wants to, I found myself saying. She shouldn't lose her aunt because of choices she didn't make. Hope flickered in Melissa's eyes. I will. Thank you. I stood, tucking the check into my bag. I need to go. Of course. She rose as well, maintaining a respectful distance. Elaine, I know words are meaningless after what I did, but I am sorry. Truly. I looked at her, really looked, seeing past the familiar features to the damaged person beneath. Our mother had shaped us both, in different but equally harmful ways. The golden child and the overlooked one, both warped by expectations neither of us had chosen. I don't know if I'll ever forgive you, I said honestly, but I hope you find peace. She nodded, tears falling freely now. You too. As I walked away, my phone buzzed with a text from Mark. Mom, Jacob got the lead in the school play. Calling you tonight with details. A smile touched my lips. Ahead of me, my study group was gathering at our usual table outside the campus coffee shop. Beyond them, the path led to the law library, where I would spend the evening preparing for tomorrow's constitutional law seminar. The autumn breeze caught my hair, now streaked with silver I no longer colored, and carried the scent of wood smoke and possibilities. Behind me lay the wreckage of a life built on lies. Before me stretched a future I was creating one choice at a time. I had lost a husband, a sister, a mother, but I had found myself. And that, finally, was enough.